called the Army Security. See, this is back in the 60s.
Oh, I had a misspent youth with it.
And we were electronic intelligence. We actually reported to NSA. You go up the chain of command, our Major General didn't report to the General of the Army, he just reported to the Chief of NSA. It's all electronic communications intelligence, and I was actually in what was called signals intelligence.
When it's red, it's off.
50 years, we couldn't talk about it.
When you're talking, that way it's a little easier for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Intercepted
I know.
Soviet satellites.
Jim, I'm Greg Emmerich, new to the Planning Commission,
Greg,
so I
Jim
guess
Stabler.
nice to meet
You're on
you.
the Historic Commission now.
No, I did.
I guess, and,
The planning.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been on the,
And you responded.
I'm trying to think about that. I've been on the Historic Commission probably for 10 years.
I didn't realize.
Rick?
I was down in Louisville today, and I told James, I said, I understand our meetings are normally on Thursday nights. Okay, that
yeah.
works good for me.
Yeah.
You don't.
Were you in the Army?
Be good for you too. Cozy.
It was. I was the weapon drop.
That's like infantry. Yep. Yeah.
I was in from 2010 to 2014.
Oh, does she?
As a social worker, yeah. There you go. Walk in.
Okay. Yeah, and we have a social worker at the Middletown City, working there. Oh, yeah, that's where I work. That's where I'm at, out there by Atrium, on Union Road. Yeah, it's full clinic, 5, 6 doctors, optometry and audiology and all that right there. Are you getting VA healthcare?
I am.
At the Dayton Clinic?
Yes.
You can transfer to Middletown if you want. It's all right there, outside of the heavy stuff, like my optometrist and everything's there, and I had my surgery at Dayton.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, unless it's something big like that, we have X-ray and all that right there in Middletown.
Hey, Monica.
Yeah, right, on Union Road.
But now that you mentioned, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's right next to the, whatever it is, rest.
We're getting cozy.
Is it Mill also? Or just,
In front of the mic, I figured you needed a mic.
Hiya, Matt.
that was if you wanted to do
Yeah, just come out there. It's real easy to transfer if you're already in Dayton. We get a lot of people that transfer from Cincinnati. Oh, is it? Yeah, it depends on where you live. Okay.
3 properties from
Because there's a lot of people that, like, some places are actually closer to Richmond than they are us, too.
Actually, close to
See, you could go to that clinic. There's an outpatient clinic there, too.
Yeah, that's
same elevation.
Okay.
So,
Well, you're probably better off than staying at Dayton.
yeah.
No, it was always planned. You're not going to come.
That's the big thing. I've been in for 10 years and have the same primary care doctor. She started a month before I did. And that's incredible. She's phenomenal. I'm scared that something's going to happen and she'll leave, but she's fairly young, actually. Oh, sure.
If you get out, when I was informed this, I had a terrible primary care physician.
Call to order a special meeting of City Council and the Historic Commission for March 1st, 2022. Let's go ahead and start with a moment of meditation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. So this is a little different situation, exciting though. So we're have to kind of navigate how we work through this specific meeting, but I would say that a roll call is prudent. So Tracy, are you able to do the roll call for council and the historic commission, or are they
I'm here for both.
awesome? Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Roger Daniel. Levi Kramer. Jeremy Lukinas.
Here.
Matt Dixon.
Here.
Jim Stabler.
Here.
Roger Daniel. Andy Brickler.
Here again.
Oh. Oh my gosh, you are on here twice.
Andy is here.
Andy Brickler. Okay. Greg Emmerich.
Here.
Okay.
Great, and for council as well?
Mr. Farrell.
Here.
Ms. Nenny.
Here.
Mr. Moon.
Here.
Mr. Muterspaw. Here. Mayor Condrey.
Here. Okay. We don't really have a set agenda for this, but obviously we know the discussion is, about the future of the Manchester and Snider buildings, and the goal of council was to not do this in a vacuum. So we really, really appreciate your guys' service to our city and your knowledge and your expertise in the area of historic buildings and historic preservation in our city and where we go with things. So I kind of wanted to open it up personally to any thoughts that you guys have as members of the Historic Commission. I don't know if you've had specific conversations about the Manchester and Snider, but the goal here is to decide, and it doesn't have to be obviously in an hour tonight, but do we move forward with demolition of these buildings and putting something new there, or is it possible that there is some form of economic feasibility that says these buildings can be restored and are, the history of Middletown retained in some fashion with that? And we don't have the answers for that, but we're hoping you guys can help in the discussions and we find a way forward for our city. And I know at some point we also want to get citizens' input as well, but we thought the first step would be to talk to you.
Considering the buildings separately or individually?
That's a good question.
Yeah, maybe both. I mean,
Do we have a microphone that you guys can pass around? Because I assume, is this being broadcast? Okay, so that way people who are watching it on YouTube can hear if you guys pass that around when you talk, I guess. That one is active though, so I think if you're close to that microphone, you won't need it. So yeah, that's a question. Do we consider them separately or together? No one's gone down that.
Well, the
that path
Manchester
yet.
building is listed on the historic register.
Can you actually pick that thing up? Because I can hear you, but I don't think it's.
The Manchester building is actually listed on the historic register. The Snider building, I don't think
It
is.
is.
It is?
It is listed on the historic register.
Okay, is it? All right, okay, they both are.
They are indeed one of the only handful of individual buildings in the city that are listed on the National Register.
So I'm new at this. Are there any engineering studies on how sound they are?
I know that there were issues in 2011 when the Sunshine shut down. It was partly the condition of the building that they shut down their operations there. However, it was apparently in good enough condition and to be considered an ideal site for a brew club in 2014 and to receive tax credits for that purpose as recently as 2020.
I'm sorry, Mike, can you speak into that microphone?
That it was considered an ideal spot for the creation of a brew club in the city in 2014, and it was to receive tax credits in 2020 for that purpose, and it was still considered a viable use of the building as recently as 2020. I think the tax credits were actually 2016, but it was still considered a viable use for the building in
And that's the
2020.
Snider building, or is that?
That's the Snider building.
Okay.
And I think it's the poor condition of the two. I know Perry Thatcher had gotten a significant insurance settlement for some losses to the Manchester, and he put all that money and more back into it. So it was better kept up than the Snider building was.
Does staff have any input on this?
condition. I feel like I've heard anecdotal things about both buildings. You know, I know folks have been in both buildings in the last couple of years, and I've heard the opposite, but I don't, you know, again, it's anecdotal. You don't know.
Well, when the developer had it, pretty much
Yeah.
nobody was able to set foot in it.
Right.
And nor has anybody, I think, since the city took possession back of it. Basically, it's been a black hole for the public.
I'm far from an expert, but I've always heard structurally they're in pretty good shape, but it's the rest of the building, the guts of the building that have issues. I don't know if staff can lend any.
Good afternoon. I can speak briefly to this. As far as the structural integrity of the inside of the building, I can't speak to. I can say that there is a safety fence around the outside because what is happening is the brick facade is falling off of the building and onto the public sidewalk. And so it is a danger to the public in that fashion, and that's why it's been secured against any entry through the parking lot side or the sidewalk side. We do have an email that was sent by the chief building official, Larry Tuttle, that they had been notified that the fence around the Sunshine property was damaged and individuals had been getting inside the building. They had the contractor resecure the fence. However, there was significant deterioration to the brick and concrete facade due to the water exposure behind the brick and the freezing and thawing that comes with winter in Ohio. That it had caused larger amounts of the brick to become loose and in danger of falling. This has been an ongoing problem, and that is the reason for the installation of the fence, to try and protect the public from any falling brick. It said it doesn't appear at this time that there's a large section that is about to fall. Weather conditions, the freezing and thawing, could exacerbate that in the future is hard to say. If a large section were to fall at one time, the fencing may not be sufficient to keep it from either coming out into the roadway, damaging a vehicle, or causing an accident. We may need to look at a long-term fix, including possibly the demolition or a more secure enclosure. If you have any specific questions for him, I would be happy to forward those on and get information for you.
I'm having a hard time, you know, obviously it's a very emotional building for the city. It has the potential, if it was kept and restored, for, you know, incredible value sentimentally for Middletown. I just can't seem to, I don't know how to make a decision without somebody going in there and doing some sort of an analysis as to what its current status is, how much it may even cost to renovate. And I can't personally make a decision without having, you know, that knowledge, because one way or the other, we're just guessing. And I don't like to guess.
Jim, weren't there a contractor or a construction company that went through, I don't know, 6, 9, 12 months ago that kind of looked at some of this stuff, not for the purpose of necessarily informing this decision, but for informing whether they might be interested, that they talked about the structural integrity of, I'm thinking of the Manchester specifically. I don't think they went through Snider. Do you recall any of that?
I don't have any specific engineering studies or otherwise, but again, it's more anecdotal. I don't know of anything that suggests it's not structurally sound. I think the discussion has been more about the economics of it, but structurally, I don't know that there's anything that suggests it's not capable of being adaptively redeveloped.
In 2020, we went through the whole CLG process. In 2020, we went through the whole certified local government process. And I know some of you here, I know Zach and Rodney were not here for that. But what that did is that opened us up to be able to have a little bit more control over our historic landmarks and do things like speed up local and national register nominations. Part of that is the government sets aside, the state sets aside grant money that can be used to look at feasibility studies for historic buildings like this. So there is money available to do just what we're talking about, so that we're not guessing.
That would be great. I guess that would be staff who would be able to look into
And would that be different than the feasibility study that was already conducted by Mr. Grau for the potential reuse of that property when he applied
I don't
for historic tax credits, say? Or are we looking at the same exact?
I think that's two different things.
These are different things.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because there were
I
some
think so.
studies conducted as a result of that.
That's what I had just
development.
pulled up because I remember actually with Hollywoodland, they were pulling from an HVS study done for the Manchester Hotel in 2018, which was completely irrelevant to Hollywoodland. However, I have the study done for the Manchester. So I have at least a draft of it. Staff was unable to find the complete version because the city did not pay for it. It was Mr. Grau, I believe, who paid for it. So I have that, but it talks about just the economic feasibility of a hotel there. It doesn't talk about refurbishing a historic building. So I don't think it's really relevant at all, at least that study, to this discussion and whether the building is savable. It's more talking about market analysis for a hotel being there.
Would that depend on the reuse then, if it were different than a hotel, say?
Yeah, I mean, HVS is Hotel Valuation Services, so they only evaluate market research on hotels.
Can't remember if that or any of his studies delved into, because I know that there were conversations, of course, all of this is anecdotally, there were conversations at one point about could that building be reused for multiple uses? Say it's got some hotel component, some apartment component, and, sort of a mixed use, adaptive reuse of that building. So I don't know if any of that study went into that, but I know that there was discussion around that.
Okay, more practical, just a question, I know most of you, but just for the historic commission, what's your opinion on it? What do you think, and what are you hearing? Do people want it to stay? Do they want something else there? I mean, what do you think as a historic commission?
I believe the Historical Society had recently done a survey of the community, and it was overwhelmingly in favor of Manchester being preserved. The Danny Snider building, I don't believe, was part of that. Of course, it's in the much more deteriorated condition. It is the building that is losing part of its facade. As far as I'm aware, there have been no issues with the Manchester's facade.
So you think if we reached out to the community, which we will do, and offer from council or the manager's office, you think it's going to be overwhelming that people want that building to stay?
For the hotel, yes.
At least the hotel, because I'm new here, I'm not from Middletown. So when I got here in 2014, I joined Historic Commission like 15, 16. And once people find out you're on council or planning and zoning or something else, they start sending you things to your house and documents and reaching out to you on Facebook and things like that. In the entire time I've been here, there's been a very consistent, whether it's at the coffee shop, if it's via email or a South Main meeting or a Highlands meeting, or somebody from a different board, it's been overwhelmingly, people keep asking us, why are you guys not doing anything to save our historic buildings? And we're like, well, we try, but we've been limited in what we could do. There was the Doug Atkins era where they're getting demolished, whether you like it or not. We don't care, they're coming down. And then there was a little bit of a pause, and now we're kind of picking back up the word demolition again. And when you look at places like Hamilton, you look at Dayton, you look at Cincinnati, you look at everywhere else except Middletown, everyone else is figuring out a way to put something in there and save the building. Because as we found out when we demolished a lot of residential houses in Oakland, we have conflicting things that we're doing. We have put this certified local government thing forward. We paid Brainwave Design, I think $150K to conduct a study on Oakland to look at its viability as a historic district. And right at the 95% mark, they were terminated, and now we're starting that process over again. And there's just, it's like spit and sputter. We spend this money, and then we don't get anything for it. And then we tear down our buildings because we say we can't put a roof on it. Well, if we hadn't wasted that money, we could have put a roof on it. We could put something in there. I get a lot of people who say, hey, I'm interested in that building, put me in touch with somebody. And I give them some email addresses, and then I follow up with them, and they say, well, I got shot down, or I was told it's for another project, or there's a disconnect between what the citizens want, what the boards and commissions want, what council wants, and what staff wants. And I think that's where the problem is we can't get on the same page. But overwhelmingly, to answer your question, the community has overwhelmingly shown support to hang on to the buildings.
Well, I can't speak for the rest of council, but I can speak for myself, is I can assure you what the citizens want is 90% of what we should be looking at.
And I agree with you. And that's where we take a lot of heat for that, because when you say, oh, we're on historic commission, like, well, why did we tear this building down? And we look into it, and there was not a certificate of appropriateness filed. It didn't go through the correct channels. It was just torn down, and then 4 months later, Doug Atkins would ask for permission through council to tear down a building that was gone months ago. And that's been kind of there's been, while we were filing certified local government paperwork, which the mission statement, the goal of that was to put preservation ahead of a lot of other things. And we have not really kept that commitment, but I feel like this today is at least a step in that right direction. It's disappointing to see us continue to waste money in all these different areas, but not just put a little bit of money in the same formula that works for everyone else around us. We're literally the last people not trying to shove a brewery into that building. And that's disappointing to hear. And when I participate in the CHAPS board for the city of Hamilton, which is like their historic commission light, when we say, hey, you shouldn't tear down that train station, which looks awful, it's in a bad spot, what in the world are you going to do with an old train station? They muster up the money to move it. And they're going to turn it into something cool, and there'll be a cool business that goes in there and it'll make money. It doesn't make sense. There were a lot of people who were saying, well, this doesn't make sense. And it might not make financial sense today, but I can tell you if the Manchester had windows and there was a brewery in there, it would be a destination spot in Southwest Ohio. When you look at the breweries we have in town, New Ales is one of them. They're in this tiny little building and they're looking to get out of it. And it's unfortunate that we can't find them something to move into. And when you have a business like that and a building like this, and you're not trying to marry the two together somehow, some way, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't work out, it's still worth a shot to look at. But I feel like we don't even take those shots. We just move right to, let's clear it and put something else new. But when you look at the city of Middletown's historic photo slides, we started tearing buildings down in the 50s, and we've never put anything back in its place. So we keep tearing buildings down for these projects to make them shovel ready, but we literally put nothing back in its place. The last bit of development we've had downtown was the O'Reillys. And had it not been for Historic Commission, we were going to get a metal building with no windows pushed back off the road to match AutoZone. And instead, we got a little bit of, we got them to do brick, we got them to do hoop lights, we got it to put something in that brought the area up a little bit. So, but other than that, we really just keep tearing things down. And I understand, I see water coming out of the Sunshine Building. I know it could be a lost cause, but we have so many other buildings left, we can't continue spending money to tear them down when there's crazy young people who will come and put crazy businesses in them and draw people from everywhere. When you go to Cincinnati, you look at the businesses and you walk in, you go, man, somebody fixed this up? Yeah. And they're shoveling money out the back door in the Brinks truck because it's working. And we seem to just keep skipping that.
Does everybody feel that way?
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Jeremy. I'm not from Middletown as well. But the one thing I look at is, like, to all what he said is, hey, we demo a lot of stuff. Where do we market anything, right? If you go to choosemiddletown.com, Manchester's not even listed as an available property. So we're not even advertising it. And I get there's backroom kind of conversations, developers come in. But, today I've received 4 phone calls of people saying, hey, I have developers that are ready to purchase this and have the equity and the money to put in, right? And again, I'm not saying that's true. It's just phone calls I've received. So I think that's the thing, is how do we advertise is the question for me. But I do think there is an opportunity, just because a building is not economic feasible for us, of our opinion, doesn't mean that there's no grants, or the model group from Cincinnati or some of these other groups can come in with their economic engine they have that's not government. That's my 2 cents on it, Ronnie.
And I do think we need to consider the property separately. The facade is falling off of the Danny Snyder Ford building. It is a hazard. I mean, it may be fixable, but we definitely need real information on that. But I'm not sure we need to tie the fates of the buildings together. Fundamentally, if that building is not salvageable, okay. If that building's not salvageable, and I think a lot of it will have to do with the fact that it's been sitting there essentially without any maintenance or any repairs or any supervision since 2011, and neglected prior to that. That doesn't mean that the Manchester is unsalvageable. So I don't want us to get the two buildings so tied together that we say, well, this is the Sunshine building is a hazard to health and safety, therefore we have to bring them down both.
I'm definitely intrigued by the concept of the CLG allowing us to access to state funds for feasibility studies of some sort. And I don't know how to look into that more, but if that's a reality, I would love to actually see some sort of a study done. And at the same token, maybe a great press release about the fact that we're doing a study so that people who may be interested in adaptive reuse of the Manchester could start engaging the city about it. I mean, I think you're right. I don't think we've advertised it probably very much at all. And if there were a press release about it, and you know, people who have social circles like you guys and others in the city are able to start engaging others about it as a result of having something out there, we don't know what we're missing otherwise.
Just like with Lincoln School, I know a bunch of us took that personally to try and save that place. We even got the building inspector to open it up for us so we could walk in. And the building inspector said the floors were soft, that we shouldn't go in, the floors were soft. But when you saw the building cut in half, the floors are like 36 inches thick, they're concrete. That building was never coming down. Was it an eyesore? Was it viable? Was it pouring water and full of homeless people? It was. But whether it makes sense and whether you know we have the money to spend on it, what we didn't do is we never really marketed it. As we dug into it, we found out that the last time the building was marketed was like 2006 for a foreclosure auction of the building. And that was the last time, as 06 or 08, that we had done any, and that wasn't even effort, that was running the publicly required thing. We never put the effort into taking a picture of it, putting it on all the socials and saying, hey, we have a tax credit project that could be marked historic because we're a CLG, we can do that. That is one of the things that allows us to do. We get to pick, and we don't have to rely on an application to the state for them to tell us that we can do it. We can do it. And that's part of why the Carnegie deal fell apart, is we sort of took some of those tools away by stopping that national register. So we keep doing these, we go one step forward and 3 steps back. But it starts with marketing. I think we have buildings that are very viable. I know all of us get people that ping us all the time that say, hey, what about this? What's going on with this? We don't know where to point them to. Where do you go to see it and look at it? When I drive to Hamilton, not to keep bringing that up, they have an inventory of old buildings. They tell you exactly what it takes to get in them, and they tell you exactly what the requirements are. You can have this building if you have 150 liquid and you're willing to put 300 in it. We'll give it to you. And it has to be for this purpose. And it's unfortunate we don't have something like that, and we could be offloading these buildings that cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, to demolish. There could be some crazy rich person from San Francisco that's got the money that sees it. Just like in Over the Rhine, they're seeing development money coming in from Europe and from Africa and all these really random places, because those projects do create value. That's all.
One thing the city has done sometimes in the past is they've given buildings for $1 Plus, they've given a forgivable loan for the amount of the demolition costs. If you're going to advertise, that might be something to consider anyway.
Do you mean specifically the cost of what it would cost to tear the building down, give that to somebody that's going to come in and invest the money?
Avoidable cost, yes.
Okay. One thing right now is, and I'm not sitting here to tear it down, but I think one of the reasons we met today, other than trying to determine the future, is there are grants out there right now to where 75% of the building being torn down can be funded right now by the state, to where it costs us no out-of-pocket money. So like I said, I'm not saying tear it down, but I guess, what would you like to see? I mean, we have hotel, we have apartments. Would you rather see people there living downtown to where they're going to the local businesses every day? Would you rather see a hotel where different people are coming in and out of? What's your guys' vision for the place?
And this is just my opinion, but we've basically torn down all residential housing in downtown.
Correct.
And the housing that's left that we haven't torn down, we're trying to tear down the rest of it in Oakland. We're trying to tear down more houses. And when I see Monica's business and Amy's business and the Slice and the Merkles, and you see the people coming in there, there's not a lot of people walking to the downtown because there's so many gaps in between the businesses and where people live. And people don't want to walk by gravel lots. They don't want to walk through abandoned parking lots. They don't want to walk through where a building once was. And it's just, we keep doing that. We have so few buildings left downtown for where people could actually live without constructing new. And new construction is going to be the hardest to finance. It's going to be the hardest money to get a bank to give a developer versus a revitalization or a renovation loan or a private capital funding of a project like that.
I mean, and if you've got 75% funding for the demolition, you're still putting up 25% to destroy a community asset and create a vacant lot, so that all you have for that 75% of free money that you got is a vacant lot, and where the city is already full of them.
That's a good point.
I think one thing to consider as well is it's let's say there's no grant money available. Obviously, if we can get to the point of where there is grants to fix it up, that's a completely different conversation, right? But dollar per dollar right now, it's going to cost you almost twice as much to fix it up than it is to tear it down and build new.
But remember, you get the tax credits back too.
Oh, I'm not
So
yeah.
I mean, so you gotta be careful when you say that, because it implies that it's double the cost, but there is a benefit restoring historic properties.
Right, and that's why I wanted to prelude with that.
Yeah. And so on that point, I want to kind of ask, so like we look at these grants, and we love grants that tear things down. We've used that a lot in the city. Have we looked at grants to restore? Has the city staff or council reached out to see, is there grants nationally, publicly, or locally, or whatever, that can drive to help economic revitalization of these historic properties?
I think one part of it is nobody's really known what to do. Like you said, some of you have told me, and people in the community, let's make it a brew pub and let's make it commercial. And then we have some people that are saying, well, we need to put residential in there or hotel in there to bring people down there. So you have the chicken and the egg once again. We've been trying to restore downtown for 10, 15 years now, and still nobody's figured out the formula to it. We said business first, but to your point, there's not really residential where people are downtown walking. So I think at some point, it's just like, what direction are we going to go? And we haven't really started that direction because people are afraid to be wrong.
Well, these particular properties were essentially locked into a developer for about 8 years who was doing nothing with them.
Right.
And there were people that were coming around and saying, why is this person still in charge of these buildings? And we've got people that would come in right now and do something with them. But there's no one we can talk to because this person's not talking to us. He's not letting them go. The city is just pointing us back at him, and he's just sitting on them. And
we're all suffering from years of the past of decisions that none of us had anything to do with, right?
I
Unfortunately, that's
understand,
what
but generally what you're gonna have is the people that have, or that want to develop them are going to have plans and that they are prepared to put their money in to pursue. And you're probably going to have multiple people come forward for things like for a building like the Manchester. Or, I mean, you just picked the very best one.
I think you make a good point about how long it was being held by someone who wasn't doing anything with it. And so if we take that into consideration and perspective and we think, you know, the city's only had possession and control of these buildings for less than a year, I think, somewhere around there. And so, you know, while I think there is a desire to rush to find some good, highest and best use, something that we talk about for that property, I think we also have to be cautious to rush into something that maybe hasn't been fully vetted or that could be one of many options. And I think that's what you guys are really saying is that, you know, maybe somebody does think it's good for this and somebody thinks it's good for something else, but we have to really give ourselves the time to understand what those uses could be, and then hopefully have a selection of options that could be a highest and best use of that property. And maybe not just go with the first viable option, which, you know, could be a demolition, but it could be an adaptive reuse. So I think that's just something that we are trying to take really cautiously and really try to understand. And I think that's the point of inviting you all here and really having this discussion and opening it up and saying that, you know, this is something that we want to talk about, that we don't want to just make a decision on, something that we just feel like we really need to vet out.
I don't think, you know, it doesn't seem as if the city has aggressively pursued any options for developing these properties since they reacquired possession. So jumping for the first thing the city to jump on once they have it, to be demolition, I mean, it doesn't really suggest that historic preservation is a city priority.
I agree, and I was gonna say something similar to Monica, you know, that, kind of what I said at the last council meeting. I think, to your point, we've only had it a year, we fought like hell to get it back over multiple years of litigation, and we haven't really had a chance to see, well, what could be, you know, and I don't wanna rush into making a forever decision, especially on the Manchester building, without having exhausted every opportunity to see what it could be reused as.
I'd recommend you market the heck out of it and let some developer, if they come in and they want to buy that, it'd be a shame to lose to Manchester with all the history of it. And somebody wants to come in and put the money into it, you all develop an agreement with them that there's some specific time frames in it, so some clown doesn't sit on it for I don't know who sat on it, but, excuse my language, clown, but somebody sat on it for 8 years and didn't do anything. Well, there should be penalties in those agreements. You know, look, you've got a chance here to develop a neat piece of property and do it, or there's penalties, or we take it back from you and we do it else. And as far as a brewery, I mean, the Snider building looks like there could be a brewery in there. I don't think that somebody's going to put a brewery inside the Manchester, and I don't see the feasibility of a hotel or a hotel downtown. I just don't see it anymore. But I think, I lived in Baltimore for a while, and they put in some real neat apartments that you couldn't get them. And there you might be able to do something like that I think would be neat, and it'd really help the city a lot too. There's more revenues, the value of them would be neat, but I would market it. Let's get it marketed and see who wants to take it over before we tear it down. And if 2 years from now nobody wants the darn things, well, that's a pretty easy answer then, because they're going to keep deteriorating. And somebody's going to have to, inside that Manchester, I've heard, is pretty bad. And I know some people have done some work in there, and if we don't get on that soon, it's going to just keep deteriorating, and the mold is going to grow on top of the mold, and the asbestos is going to be even a bigger issue to get rid of. But somebody may know how to do those things and make it a neat property, but I'd market it.
And I hope that this is an opportunity to, to make an open call to anyone who might be interested in this property or who might have great ideas about it, to reach out to staff or reach out to city council, so that we can start hearing those ideas if people have them. Because, like Andy said, there's people who've talked about a brewery. Well, I've never heard from those people. I've never, reach out to your council people. If you've got an idea or you have something that you feel like isn't being heard, reach out to us. I'd love to hear any idea that anybody has for the Manchester. I have, like many people in Middletown, a lot of really great memories of the Manchester. I worked there for a little while. It's where I met my business partner and formed a lot of really great relationships and friendships, and just have a lot of really great memories. And so I know that can't just be true for me. It's got to be true for so many people in Middletown, which makes it such a special and emotional conversation for so many people. So, we hear you. We hear the citizens. Obviously, a Facebook poll is not a full cross-section of the city of Middletown, but we're always available if people have comments or things that they want to share with us. So I just want to put that out there and say, that this is an open invitation to share your ideas, and that we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because the one thing you mentioned, the brewery keeps coming up. The brewery's not for the Manchester, right? That Snider Sunshine Building, whatever you want to call it, that looks like it could be a cool brewery. And there's been some local breweries that have said things. So what I would ask, is there a way we can see what has been proposed for these buildings? If anything has been come to staff, that, is there any requests that are open? Because I hear things that are different, from outside. I just don't know if that's something we can do.
It's a good request.
What would you be,
So
I
you
guess,
like trying to buy it or getting into
what would you be
it?
looking for? Just like, oh, there's somebody that wants to white box it. Would that be like the
Yes,
response?
there's like, is there been local businesses that have been trying to get into the buildings and see them? Or are they being said, hey, it's already locked up in another deal, it's not for sale, we don't know what we're doing? I'm not trying to speculate, by any means, but these are the conversations on the historic people are asking me like, hey, I hear so-and-so's been trying to get into this building for a year. Now, 8 years ago, we agreed there was a problem there because we didn't own it. So that's just something to think about.
Another building that comes to mind is the Armco Research Building. Like, that is one of the only Art Deco buildings we have left in town. And after one council meeting here, I was approached by someone from Tams Construction, and they were looking for a project. Apparently, they have the background, apparently have the money. I can't validate that. But they put an offer in on the building, and apparently there was an extension asked for. And they said, well, that's weird because we're buying the building. We've never seen an extension on someone selling a building. Why would you want to hang on to it longer? And they later found out that the city took ownership of it, which is interesting because we take ownership of it and immediately the first thing we see is it's being demolished. And we're going to put offices there. And that whole Oakland plan was blown apart, bit by bit by bit. And now we're kind of in this weird spot with it where the people that live there haven't really heard anything. There was a lot of public meetings. There was a lot of stuff going on. And all of a sudden we've just sort of stopped with one of the first things that we go after is demolishing that building. When we have someone that supposedly wanted to look into it and had some plans.
The guy that wanted to do residential?
I think so.
There's deed restrictions on the property that prohibit residential from being there.
Yeah, again, it just goes back to, we have to find some use. If we own the building, we own the deed. Can we not change a deed? Can you not?
From who it was transferred, from the original transferee, I believe. I'm not an expert on it, but because of what's in the ground, they say it can't be used for residential because of.
Yeah, and that could be true.
A lot of that brownfield area is like that.
Yeah, and that's fine. But my point is, it's a very consistent thread that all of us here is we've tried reaching out, we've tried this, we've tried that, but we just can't get anywhere. But they seem to get places elsewhere. The old playing card factory, they figured out a way to get residential in there when it wasn't really a permitted use down in Norwood. There's places where this stuff has been done and people figure it out. For some reason, we just stall and we just move right to demolition.
So, Jeremy, I think that this sort of brings up a point that I would like to maybe we could address on a more regular basis. I know we've got council representatives to our boards and commissions. But I do find it helpful to be hearing from you guys. I mean, even if it's just a regular update to come to us and talk to us about some of the things that, and I've said this to multiple boards, you know, you are an advisory board. As much as we ask you for advice on specific questions, if there are issues that you all are talking about in your board and commission meetings that you want to share with council and you want to make a presentation on, I think that is one way for us to improve our communication from boards and commissions to council so that we can all sort of figure out how to be on the same page, because that seems like it's part of the issue that we're talking about here.
That's because this is the first time city council has been open to meeting and having an open dialogue with public available to where anybody here could speak about it, to voice their opinion on it. This is the first time since I've been doing it that we've done this. I think we tried some form of this maybe with a couple other people. We did 3 minutes. It was more like a council meeting, but this is the first time we've had an open dialogue like this to try and come up with, to spitball and see if there is something that we can do besides tear it down. And at the end of the day, that still might be the thing we do, but we should at least try what other people are doing. Try to put it on Instagram. Try to put it on Facebook. Try to get somebody with a bunch of money who's crazy enough to take a shot at it like they do everywhere else. We really, the citizens deserve for us to at least try that, because it seems to work everywhere else. And I hear this very consistent thread of Middletown's not like Dayton, it's not like Cincinnati, it's not like Madeira, it's not like Urbana, it's not like Xenia. How? How is it not? We have old buildings, we have the cheapest real estate anywhere around. I've never seen cheaper real estate here. Good quality homes, we have a ton of historic homes. We have such a huge amount of assets within the city that we just don't take advantage of. And it's unfortunate because it seems like it's slowing our revitalization down, where others might be seeing a little bit faster pace than us.
Well, I commend you all for opening up the way you have. Let's keep building on that stuff. That's how you make it better.
Yeah, and the one thing I would just say, Monica, that I think was just put it out there is there is no council liaison or representative on historical commission. It is not in our code of confidence or code of whatever it's called. So that may be a first opportunity we can look at, and definitely to your point, if we can bring presentations and have this open dialogue, that's key.
Well, I know 3 of you guys have reached out to me within the last week just on different projects. So you guys are doing your jobs, right? So we want to be here to support that. And I think another important thing is, I think all of us up here, we want to see something done with that. I just don't want to get to the point of where we're subsidizing our present and our future for things of the past. Obviously, I own rentals in Middletown. Some of them are older. I'm buying Perry Thatcher's his mom's house right now. I care about things like that, but I just don't want to see us throw away. I don't want to see us finally getting into the green and doing great things in the city and then have to stall everything to make this project happen. I want to make sure that it's something that the private sector has to do. I don't want to subsidize millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I think that's what you guys are saying as well.
Do we have any projects? Do we have any projects currently slated for the land or the buildings?
I know Mr. Palaniuk mentioned something at the end of the strategic planning session on Saturday. It seemed as though someone possibly was doing a market study for a bunch of land downtown. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Jim.
I've heard we want to demolish it for hotels. I've heard all kinds of anecdotal things, as everybody has.
Yes, you are correct. We do have a developer that is doing preliminary due diligence to look at a mixed-use, primarily market-rate residential development on that site. But obviously, there's a whole lot of work they have to do, including a number of feasibility studies that aren't done yet. So I hate to put too much stock into it or talk about it too much, because they've simply expressed an interest to the point that they are doing that effort. So that is what we know at this point.
Jim, are they specifically looking at something that could fit on that acreage or just on that amount of acreage somewhere in our downtown?
Really that specific location, because of its proximity to the YMCA, the Arts Center, and the core of downtown. That's what makes it attractive. So no, they wouldn't put it somewhere else as a result of that.
They would not be interested in adaptive reuse of the existing buildings.
It would not be economically feasible, no.
Weren't we going to have that sort of development in the side of the Middletown High School? Also that factory not too far away that was demolished a few years before that? Has anybody seen any of these mixed-use developments actually materialize? Yes, here, after those buildings were demolished.
We come up with these ideas and then we just tear it down. The first thing I always see on every budget is demolition of this building, and nobody wants to hear anything but we're tearing it down. And again, it's unfortunate because it's tear it down because, like Zach said, we don't want to hold up our future because of our past. We keep tearing down the past, but we don't put anything into the future. We do one piece, but not the other. So I agree with you on that. If there's a viable plan for those buildings that accomplishes a lot of goals and makes the city better, obviously I think the public will listen to that. But it's difficult to sell demolition to every human being. I feel like I'm being stoned in public sometimes because it's where everybody had their prom, it's where they had their homecoming, it's where they got married, it's where they went to this. It's an icon in the city.
I feel like
I don't know that you really have a future if you have no past.
I feel like we're all on a similar page as far as if it can be repurposed. I think everyone for an economically viable amount of money that someone is willing to put into it. I don't think anyone is opposed to that. The question is now what, right? I mean, so I know city staff, we have Annetta Curso used to be a historic. Do we have? James, okay, so I guess I don't know how staffing is working and who's focused on what, and if anyone can be looking into things. Do you want to come up and speak to that, or anyone?
I've met with several developers, have talked to several people, have talked to New Ales. If anyone has any questions, they can talk to us. I think one of the things we need to determine is if anyone can go in the building, because Chief Lawley has indicated that it's not safe for people to walk in. Some people want it tore, so I think we'll probably need to get with our legal department first of all to see if it's even viable enough for people to walk through before we start marketing it. But we meet with anybody. I've probably had 5 meetings today. Anyone calls, we'll meet, we'll tell them. Someone had reached out to me for a tour recently, and we told them that we're just not giving tours right now because we don't know the viability of the building. It's been told to us that it's not safe to go in. I went in it about 6 months ago, and I was sick for a week afterwards. So it's not a healthy building right now. But if anyone has any questions.
Asbestos and
Yes.
those sort of issues,
Yes.
the mold and the asbestos that are
Yes.
keeping people out. Okay.
I've had mold poisoning before, so
Yes.
it's not fun.
I was, yeah.
We're
So,
gonna need- we
but if
probably need-
anyone wants to call, like, we can generate a list so that if and when we do something, we don't put it out to list, because it's not one of the projects that we would put out to list. We like to vet people, because what we've seen in the past is the city has gotten in bed with some developers who haven't really done their due diligence, their work. So what we have really tried to do is meet one-on-one with these developers to do the vetting and to make sure that these people have the financial qualifications, that they have the capital stack, that they understand historic tax credits. It's not the end all, but we do follow it. We know that Senator Shuri just increased the tax amount for historic tax credits, so we follow all of that. We know about, all the available tools for the right people. It's just, I think people are just passionate about it, and they think that they can get this building for $1 and put in 200,000, and then the city's going to come in with the 10 million, because that's kind of what we've heard. So, but I'm welcome to talk to anybody or create a list or follow up with anything.
Can we get an official answer from whether we need to do some air quality testing in there, fire department, whatever it takes to find out, can we go in the building? Because an anecdotal, someone getting ill after having been in there is not, I can't run on that. and that's okay, but like, what does it take, right? Because otherwise, we're never gonna find somebody who's ever interested in the building if we can't allow them access in some capacity. So whatever, I don't know if it's legal that needs to be in that, if it's the fire, I don't entirely know what that would take.
Happy to help. Nope, go ahead.
I have been in the building. You can go in the building, but we would recommend a respirator if you're going into the building. I think that's clear. And then you want to be very careful where you step because there are a lot of debris around, so you have to be very, very careful. So probably if someone were to sign a release, wear a respirator, and that they go in well lighted and with the knowledge of where they have to step, then the possibility exists.
Okay.
I know when you walk into a foreclosed home, you have to sign a waiver, and they say if you don't wear a respirator and you get sick, it's not our fault. So I'm sure we
There you
can
go.
draft up something, I mean, it should be simple.
Yeah, can I also say my piece just real quick? I think it's important for you all to recognize whose roles are what in this. You guys are technically in the role of property owner, and the Historic Commission is actually in the role of the review board for, quite frankly, in some senses, whatever you want to do. And I say that in that, and we did a very lengthy training with the Historic Commission to figure out and explain, not that they needed it, they're a very good working board. What are the standards? What are the procedures? How does it all apply? It's important for you guys to know that you've got a lengthy set of historic rules and regulations that kind of govern in two respects. You've got just historic districts in any property that could be in that district. Maybe it's historic, maybe it's not. And you additionally also have historic landmarks and buildings that are actually designated. And I was just doing the research on that to confirm what I knew to be true, and it's just like City of Cincinnati's. If you want to, as a property owner, i.e. council, demolish your building that's located in a historic district and is actually designated as a historic landmark, you first have to go to Historic Commission and prove that it's economically infeasible to be used for any purpose. So I think that staff can potentially support that a number of ways, but just bear in mind when you're thinking about what do we want to do with this when we grow up with it is you're first going to have to answer, quite frankly, to them to demonstrate it can't be used for any economically feasible purpose. Only then, if it can't be used, then would you as the property owner be allowed to tear it down? Maybe it can't, but I think your thought process as to, hey, what do we do here? What should we do here is, I think you need to figure out, can it be actually once and for all put back to use or not? Because if it is, then that's your answer.
I think, and thanks, Ben, because that's helpful, real helpful. But I think where my frustration comes in just on this, and I'm sure, I know Tal's been on council for 6 years, and he's probably feeling it too. And but we have a group here of people that love the city, obviously, because you're volunteering your time to do this. You're knowledgeable about this and the Historic Commission. And for you to feel like you're hitting your head against the wall every time you offer input, I think that's the problem. And I think we just need to do a better job, whether it's council, staff, whoever, listening and responding quickly and hearing you out. And maybe these type of sessions is what we need to do in the future for a lot of different things, not just Historic Commission. Because, you know, we have these boards and these commissions and we vote to put people on them, so we should listen to them. You know, earlier I said 90% is what the community wants, but there is 10% that you have to look at that the community might not know. And I'm sure that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think it's important we listen to you. And it's important that as a council and as a city, we make sure that the community is heard. I know you guys have the eyes and ears of the community because I know you guys. So, and I know you do. So we need to do a better job of that, I think, listening to the commissions and the boards.
So does it start with opening this up to obviously figure out legal? Does it start with trying to get businesses to come in here and say, here's our proposal? Or does it start with trying to find someone that did a study to figure out, all right, how much does it cost to white box the entire Manchester, get it from, say, 700 to 1,100 square foot apartments or whatever I mean, which direction do we go?
I
What
think
do you
the
guys
first step would be to evaluate the present condition of the building.
Well, that's what I mean, okay.
And how do we, is that through the
how's-
CLG grant availability? Is that?
The verbiage and the purpose and scope of a certified local government and what it affords you, one of the very first things it says is it provides you money via grants that the state requires. They set aside 10% of some fund that they require that money be given to municipalities to do feasibility studies on historic buildings. I don't know all the details on it. I know we're using a consultant for the Oakland stuff, because we got rid of our last consultants. So I don't know the process, but I know that right in the beginning of the first paragraph, that is the purpose and scope, is to provide that service to us.
So you're not sure exactly what a cost estimate for something like the Manchester would be to do
No,
that?
I wouldn't have a clue.
So, and that being said, I mean, so would we would, regardless as a city, need to prove to Historic Commission that it was viable or not? So
If you want to tear it down,
Right.
you will have to be able to demonstrate to Historic Commission that it's economically infeasible to keep the building up. I've seen that, quite frankly, might not be popular, but I was one of the lawyers on the Dennison Hotel downtown working to get it torn down. We did an economic feasibility study that showed that it could be done. It was outrageously expensive. They can be very expensive to do right. You'll have a whole fleet of engineers that come in their masks and all that, and you'll have appraisers that get involved as well, that basically will demonstrate or attempt to demonstrate that it's functionally obsolete. A lot of times it's based off of where the hallways are, the rooms are laid out, things such as that nature, and can you actually do it? It can be very expensive, but I mean, alternatively, you know, I don't know, maybe putting it out on the, I'm just a dumb lawyer, I don't know this stuff, but, you know, maybe it's marketing it and seeing what the market could bear, is their interest. And maybe staff goes, duh, we've been doing that for years. I don't know the answers to that, but.
I'm just trying to figure out, you know, so legally speaking, and what, you know, this scenario or that, what our next step would be. I mean, if there's someone who's interested in developing the land, then we've got a lot on our shoulders to prove.
And you'll want
that's
that
the
developer
case.
to be keenly aware of their need to be able to prove that
And
it's
that
economically
developer would be responsible for the financial piece of proving that case to our historic commission.
correct.
I'm just trying to talk through all these things and vet them out so that we really understand what those next steps would look like, if we went down this road or another road.
And I don't want to oversell the concept of doing this big fancy economic infeasibility or feasibility study, whichever way it is. It may very well be the developer goes there in conjunction with staff, they can say, look, we've marketed it for X number of years, we've done this. We leased it for $1 to somebody, that didn't work out. We think that it's not economically feasible to do. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to make that decision on, do they actually believe it's economically infeasible? So they're the ones that are going to have some level of comfort from whomever is providing that testimony that, no, really, we can't salvage this building.
And then for clarification on our charters too, I'm curious, and maybe you know the answer to this or not, is that the reason why we do not have a city council representative to historic
I don't
commission?
know the answer to that one. I took note
I
of that.
guess I didn't realize that that was the case when I mean, even in the times that we've gone through appointments and all of that we didn't have someone
I
on
brought it up
historic.
to Amy quite a few times, and she just says it's not in the charter and it's not in the bylaws of the Historic Commission, and as such, we've never appointed anyone.
Well, that doesn't mean that it couldn't be or that it shouldn't be, and so that's something
Yes.
that I know we've had a lot of discussion about as a council of, you know, how are some of our boards and commissions organized? Is it the right way? Are there improvements that could be made? Is there some sort of reorganization that could help or benefit both council and our boards and commissions? So that's something that I would like to look into. Obviously, it would have to be a non-voting member, but I just want to put that out there because I do feel like, you know, that line of communication is maybe not there.
Yep, I
Mr.
agree.
Moon, did you have something?
Yeah, I had two thoughts. I was going to suggest the same thing. If you guys are interested in having a council liaison, a non-voting member, I think, you know, maybe you could work with Ben or Susan to reorganize your bylaws so that we could do that. I think that's where a lot of that communication naturally happens. Whereas, you know, the boards I serve on, people just call me up and say, hey, did you know about this? Or this is going on, need your help pushing this through. And if you don't have that, that's probably part of the problem. And then second thought is, I think we do need to leverage the CLG, or even if the CLG is not available for the grant, to find out just structurally, environmentally, like what is the situation? Because now that we finally have it back, that should be part of the process.
And we could do both at the same time, I would think. Why not try to go after a developer at the same time we try to see how?
I would like to see staff look into what it would cost to get somebody to actually assess the building for stability and environmental.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two steps forward. One, we need to figure out, okay, if someone wants to get it in that building tomorrow because they're interested in developing it, you know, what do they need to go through? Because we need to be able to let them in and do that if it's
I can find a way.
So that's
That part.
one, right? The other thing is, I think we will all like staff to look into if there are grants available through CLG to do feasibility or status, of that building and its future. We would love to be applying for those. And if the grants aren't there, then let's see if we can't find a consultant to go in and do it, because I think it needs to be done one way or the other. I do want to be careful. I feel like we have, as a city, found a lot of consultants who will tell us what staff asks them to tell us. So I want to be really careful, not just on this topic. This is rampant problem, but particularly on this topic, that whoever we find to look at it, we don't say, hey, can you give us a feasibility study that says this is economically infeasible? Because that's not a feasibility study. So I really want to be careful that this is an independent party who has done it for both sides and been, true to the realistic nature of something, and not trying to bend towards a confirmation bias of one side or the other. And that's really critical for.
I don't disagree with you in the least. The problem is if you kind of let the market decide what it can bear, the developer or whomever will come in and conveniently their economic feasibility study will surely agree with them. So there's always some implicit bias.
There is.
You go that route as opposed to a city just saying, we're going to do this ourselves.
And that's why I say if the city is looking at doing this, we have to make sure that we're not having any confirmation bias or implicit bias of any sort.
That'll just cost you money. It'll be expensive to get a true analysis.
Otherwise, it's a waste of money, so I'd rather spend it personally.
What do you think roughly, I mean, even in a general range, of something that,
Oh,
How big was the Denison Hotel?
well, that was like
Yeah.
that was an anomaly. That was like front page of Inquirer. I mean, we spent lots of money there.
Do we have staff that are able to look into the CLG grant aspects that may be available? I see nods. Okay.
I would like for the Historic Commission to be involved in that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's important.
we just thought maybe you guys are so smart you didn't need a council liaison. That's kind of what I was thinking.
And obviously, if there are citizens that heard the conversations tonight and you have more input to provide based on what we're all talking about, please feel free to email City Council, Historic Commission. We want to hear from you guys. We've heard from a lot of people, and I think the discussions tonight are along the lines of what we've been hearing and what people are wanting. So I hope we're doing a good job with that. But if not, I hope we'll hear about it, and I'm sure we will hear about it. So please reach out. Does anyone from Historic Commission or Council have anything else to add before we? Well, thank you guys for taking extra time and coming to meet with us, and keep up the good communication. Great. With that, we'll adjourn this meeting and we'll reconvene at 5:30 for the council meeting.
Did you also get a packet of letters